I'm going to make a presentation about the Bergen Belsen concentration camp. Bergen Belsen was a Nazi concentration camp. It was located near the villages of Bergen and Belsen. It was established in 1940, but at that time it was exclusively a prisoners of war camp. Then, in 1943, the SS took over a portion of Bergen Belsen and they converted it into a concentration camp. 52,000 prisoners died in Bergen Belsen, some of them in the concentration camp, and others died just after they were freed because they were too ill to recover. The concentration camp was composed of numerous camps. There was the prisoners of war camp, the residence camp, and the prisoners camp. The prisoners of war camp was composed of German and Belgian soldiers. The residence camp was where the Jews were. They were located in 4 subcamps, and they were located there with the pretext that they were going to be exchanged for German nationalists held by the Allies. And finally, the prisoners camp, which housed more than 500 prisoners of various nationalities, virtually all non-Jews. There was many diseases which spread in Bergen Belsen, such as typhus, tuberculosis, and typhoid fever. These diseases spread because the camp was designed to hold 10,000 people, but at the end it held more than 60,000 people. So this overcrowding led to very poor conditions. There was almost no water, there was almost no food, poor sanitary conditions, no shelter. So this facilitated a lot the spread of the diseases. This is a description of the camp by Lucille E., which was a former prisoner. One night, a woman screamed continually and she gave birth to maybe a pound large infant. The infant died immediately. She didn't even know she was pregnant. In Bergen Belsen, there was no water. There was hardly any food. They were open, not even ditches, open huge pits with bodies, naked bodies. Most of them were decaying and green. Now I'm going to talk about the story of Judy Jacobs. Judy Jacobs was a Jewish child. She was born in Hungary in 1937. During her early years, Judy lived a privileged life. Her father was a radiologist and her mother was an artist decorator. But Judy began noticing some changes, and they happened because of the rise of Hitler. Some of these changes included that her family members were banned from running their businesses. The Jews could only go outside for a couple of hours a day. Judy couldn't go to school anymore. Then, the 30th of June of 1944, Judy and her family were forced on a train on the station of Budapest. They weren't allowed to carry many things, only the belongings that they could carry in a suitcase. Judy said that she felt they were on the train for about a week and they had no food, no water, or a bucket to relieve themselves. After that time, they arrived at the Bergen Belsen concentration camp. Judy described the camp as a place where it was impossible to escape from because it was surrounded by multi-layers of barbed wire and with guard towers everywhere. This is a description of their routine in the camp. In the morning, we got some cold, brown liquid that they called coffee. We either got some rice, which was also cold and not very much, or a piece of stale bread, Jacob said. And then there was nothing until the end of the day, at which time we got, a cross between a soup and a stew, I guess. It was an orangey liquid, which always had a film floating at the top, and various and sundry things floating. And that was our dinner. Needless to say, everyone was skin and bones. They had no duties in the camp, but each morning they had to gather for roll call. Judy says that at first the people in the camp were spirited. She said that the teachers there tried their best to teach the kids, even though they had no books or any other resources. She also said that people interested in various topics like music and arts, they gathered for talks, and that her father and other physicians, they tried to hold medical clinics. Judy also said that she had only one happy memory from being in Bergen Belsen, and that was when her mother, which I said before was an art decorator, was teaching some kids art lessons, and she was teaching them. Each of them had a stake, and they drew on the ground. In December 1944, some prisoners, including Judy and her parents, were taken to Switzerland. A Jewish organization there had paid for their release. Judy and her parents had been freed, but her other family members were all murdered in other concentration camps. Jacobs and her parents immigrated to the United States in 1946, and she lives there now with her family. The most famous inmate of Bergen Belsen was Anne Frank. At first, Anne Frank lived in hiding, then she was taken to Auschwitz, and afterwards she was taken to Bergen Belsen, her and her sister Margot, and another 1,000 women. Anne and her sister Margot died, both of them, of typhus, because of what I said earlier, that there were very poor conditions in the camp, so the spread of the disease was easy. The Red Cross concluded that their death was in February 1945. And now there's a memorial for both of them where the camp was before. The end of the concentration camp. The camp was liberated by British troops on April 15th of 1945. The British found around 60,000 prisoners in the camp, and most of them were seriously ill. There were thousands of corpses that lay unburied on the camp. In the camp, there were very poor conditions, so 13,000 of the people that were freed died shortly afterwards because they were too ill to recover. When they finished evacuating the whole camp, the British forces burned it down to prevent the spread of the diseases such as typhus. And after the liberation, the British set up a displaced person camp which housed more than 12,000 survivors. These are the words of a member of the British Army Film and Photographic Unit. The bodies were a ghastly sight. Some were green. They looked like skeletons covered with skin. The flesh had all gone. There were bodies of small children among the grown-ups. In other parts of the camp, there were hundreds of bodies lying around, in many cases piled 5 or 6 high. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.